So yesterday we learned a couple of things that were a little bit off topic. We learned about something called shechunas kloros. If you find three mesim together in a configuration that would be consistent with a Yiddish kever, then you have to check a distance of 20 amas around to make sure there are no other kvarim. We learned that the purpose of checking is because someone who's buried permanently is not allowed to be moved, but someone who was only buried temporarily could be removed. And we also learned that when you do remove a mace, you have to take away all the earth and you have to take a 2-inch layer of virgin soil. You have to go down to virgin soil and then 2 inches from the virgin soil. We learned that the only time you're chayshu that it's a Yiddish Mitzvah forest, of course, if the mess is buried as a normal mess is buried, that means lying on his back with his hands by his side, not sitting over. Also, all the heads are lined up. If there's multiple mason lying in a row, all the heads are lined up. For instance, all the heads are towards the north or towards the south, but they're all in the same direction. And only if we see that it's buried like a Yid, do we need to be concerned that it's a Yiddish kever. Okay. Then we learned that the place where we know you have to take some earth with you is from Yaakov Avinu, who said, "Unisasani mi Mitzrayim." Take me out with a little bit of Mitzrayim. So take some of the earth of Mitzrayim with you. We learned that was a machlokes tanoim. Then we learned a shaila as to whether or not, being that when you find the first one and the second one, you don't yet assume that it's a basic chorus only until you find a third. But you've already moved the first and the second. What would be the halacha? Can you move now the third? So there were two lashonis and one lashon you were allowed to. And these mishnayos are only being brought because they share a similar language of raglayim ladovar to the mishnah that we had earlier when we were talking about a Nazir becoming tamei by tumas hatahim. Okay, the next thing was safek negoim. We learned that if on the way becoming tamei there's a safek if he was tamei or not, then you go to the kula because of the chazaka, like Duvi mentioned yesterday. And if someone is becoming tar, you go to chumrah based on the safek, based on the chazaka. And the pasuk of l'taharoi, which tells you that by tzaras you focus on the tahira, you give precedence to the tahira. That was referring to a case where we had a safek if the haris came first or the white hair came first. In order for it to be tamei, the white hair has to come only after the skin gets affected. The first of the hairs, then the white hair. You don't know which one. We paskin bevadai that it's tar. Rabbi Yeshua used the word kiha to say tar. No, we know that from the thyroid. Then we discussed azov. Unlike a woman, azov is very different, and it's interesting to note that when the Moinei mitzvahs count, the mitzvahs mitzvah is one mitzvah that applies both to male and females. But ziva, azov is a mitzvah, and azava is a separate mitzvah. And the reason for it is because they have very different halachas. And one of them is highlighted in our very Mishnah, where azov, the first two re'iyos, or according to one sheet in the Gemara, even the first three re'iyos, you have to check to make sure that these re'iyos didn't come for some other reason. And they're not real ziva. But the fourth or the third, depending on who you hold like, that already you assume that it's real ziva. And that's how we finished the Gemara yesterday. So now we're going to continue on in the shaila of ziva. The Mishnah also told us another case of safek was where if you beat somebody, if someone beats somebody very hard and he causes him to die, but he doesn't die right away, if the doctor determined that the way you beat him would have caused death, then the perpetrator is chayiv as a ritzeach. But what happened if he beat somebody and the doctors assumed this fellow is not going to make it, and then miraculously this fellow started to get better, and then later on his condition deteriorated and he died? There, although the chum say chayiv, from the Chemi says it's potter because it's reglayim l'davar. Once again, using those same words to say that it's likely that it was from his sickness, from his pre-existing condition, not from the beating. Okay, Amarava, loy tema safek chaza, safek loy chaza. Don't say When it says in the pasuk, when it says in the Mishnah, Oinzoi usveikoi, so the Mishnah says Oinzoi usveikoi, and this is referring to somebody who has already seen 2 times. So we assume that it's ziva. So therefore, Oinzoi usveikoi ushich v'zaroi tmeim, they're all tamei sheraglaim l'dover. So the Gemara is going to elaborate on what that means. So we're talking about sveikoi first. Amar Rava, thank you so much, Mati. Amar Rava, loy tema, safek chaza. Safek loy chaza. Don't say the safek that's discussed in the Mishnah is a safek if he saw b'chalal or he didn't see b'chalal. Elavade chaza. We're talking about where he for sure had in the Mishnah. The question is safek machma shich v'zera, safek machma asreiyah. The question is, did he only see because of the shich v'zera, or did he see because of ziva? So then we say kivan sheniskak l'tuma sveikai tamei. Since anyway we said he's tamei already because of the earlier re'iyas that he had, therefore he's tamei. Now, what does it mean? What does it mean he saw because of shich v'zera? What does that mean? So there's a very important tosfos. Pirish ri kidamrinam beperak hamapelas ziva de psicho beishich v'zera uloy sasra elo yom echad. Here we're speaking about the third riyah where he has shiva nekiyim. If there is ziva that has some shich v'zera mixed into it, normally when you see ziva during the shiva nekiyim, it's soiser, and you have to start counting over all shiva nekiyim. But if there's shich v'zera there as well, then it's only soiser one day. Ziva the loy psicha beishich v'zera sasra shiva. But if it's pure ziva, then it's soiser the entire count. Rava Mairi, Rava is speaking about a case. He checked, he had in the mission, and he saw shich v'zera and ziva, 2 different things on his beged. But did they come separately, which means the ziva came by itself, and therefore v'yister shiva, or maybe pasach b'ziva, meaning the ziva was mixed together with the shich v'zera as it came out, shabo yachad, and therefore, because we know if the shich v'zera is mixed with the ziva, it's only soiser one day. So the halacha is, you say sveikoi tamei. Once he's already seen 2 times, and he has to count shiva nekiyim, we assume that the re'iyah will be mitamim. We'll assume the worst. We'll assume that the ziva came separately. Zok tehelig mishnah weiter. Shich v'zarei tameya. It says we know what that is. But what is shich v'zarei tameim? What does that mean? What do you mean the shich v'zarei is tamei? Correct Gemara lamai. Lamaga? Are you telling me that the Mishnah here is trying to say a bombshell chiddush that if one touches shich v'zera, that one is tamei? Mi gara mi shich v'zera the tahar. Why should the shich v'zera of a zov be any less tamei than the shich v'zera of a regular person? And we already know that the shich v'zera of a regular person is tamei b'maga. Ela zarai shel zav mitame b'masa. Maybe what our Mishnah is telling us a chiddush is that there's an upgraded level of tumah on the shich v'zera of a zov that is tamei b'masa. Correct Gemara man shamis laha. The Amar shich v'zera shel zav mitame b'masa. You need to find some time that holds like that. You can't make up a whole new tumah by yourself and then blame it on our Mishnah. If you want to find a Tana that says it's Matama b'masa, the Tanya we learned. That's not who we're talking about. But Rabbi Shua Aimer, Matama b'masa. Shich v'zera abazov is Matama b'masa. You know why? Because it has to have some ziva content. So you can't say that our mission is going according to Rabbi Yeshua, because I feel like Rabbi Yeshua lo yamar elam shum tzitzuch ziva. Rabbi Yeshua never said that shich v'zera on its own matama b'masa. It's only matama b'masa because of the ziva involved, and we know ziva is matama b'masa. But if you have pure shich v'zera without any ziva mixed into it, lo yamar, he never said it's matama b'masa. So you want to say that our mission is trying to say a chiddush in shich v'zera avazov, that's matama b'masa. Where do you find a Tana who says that? Maybe let's abort that for a second. What does the Mishnah mean when the Mishnah says that shich v'zera is mitama? Maybe it means she'ein toilim boy, that you cannot be toilet in the shich v'zera. What does it mean that you can't be toilet in it? So let's quickly peek into the Tosfos. Amar Abada Barava Loimish Ein Toilaba. The Masech Zavin Tanan. We learned the Masech Zavin Haraya Keri. If someone saw Keri, Einoi Mitama Beziva Kalma Eislais. If someone sees Keri, then for the next 24 hours, if he has an emission of Ziva, it does not count as Ziva. Why? Shakeri Poiter Ziva Habola Charea Kalma Eislais. If someone sees Keri for the next 24 hours, he cannot become a Zov, because if he sees Ziva, it's like Oinus. They would say if you jump, if you carry, we look at a whole bunch of different things that would cause Ziva that aren't really Ziva. Who didn't seeing Keri does the same thing. But once a person already had two re'iyos that we know are good re'iyos, then the Shich V'Zera will not pater. So maybe that's what it means. It's not talking about if you touch the Shich V'Zera, are you Tomei or not, like we thought until now, that the Shich V'Zera is Matam B'masa. Rather, even if you see Shich V'Zera, it will not stop a Ziva from being counted as a real Ziva. That's what Rabbi Ada Bar Ava wanted to suggest is Pshat in our Mishnah. Tover Rav Papa Kamei de Rava Lememar. Rav Papa Kamei de Rava wanted to explain what's the reasoning why if someone sees Shich V'Zera, then if you see Ziva after it for 24 hours, it's not considered Ziva. Because Adi Chol Shehu Dechazi. It must be because once someone is Moitzi Zera, so it weakens him, and it's like a condition that can cause evil, like we learned, if you're sick, or if you jump, or if you run, or whatever. Amalei Rabba, you cannot say that having an emission of Shich V'Zera makes you weak, and I'll prove it to you. But now we learned, Gershin is Geir. What happened if a Ger just became a Ger, and we know that he was Moichi Shich V'Zera right before he became a Ger? Nevertheless, Mitabe Biyad the Ziva. He's Mitama right away with Ziva. Now let's think about that for a second. Why would his physical properties be any different? If seeing Shich V'Zera says that for the next 24 hours he's weak, and therefore if he sees Ziva, you'll blame it on the Oinus, and you won't say that it's Ziva, why would a Ger be any different? And to add more to that, the biggest chayli is also becoming a ger. Accepting upon yourself the oil mitzvahs weakens you, like we know the story with Rish Lakish, right? After he was makabel, he couldn't jump out. So here you have a ger who's highly weakened, and therefore, why would you take Matam Beziva? Elamai, your theory that seeing Shich V'Zera weakens somebody, and therefore it's a Riyah of Ziva afterwards wouldn't count, does not make sense. So we have to go back to our original pshat in the Mishnah that we're speaking about the Shich V'Zera itself being Matama, and it's Matama B'masa. The problem is we couldn't find a Tana who in fact agrees that Shich V'Zera by itself of a Zov is Matama B'masa. I'm sorry? No, it's LMI, it's not because of weakness. LMI, you can't say, LMI, you cannot say that if someone sees Shich V'Zera, that causes a weakness that will no longer allow Ziva to be Chal. Doesn't help. Right, so Vice the Rosh, there's a difference between that weakness and the weakness of a guy who was running, or a weakness of a guy who's sick. I guess not all weaknesses are created equal. Okay, so Zakt Gemara El Tanai, let's go back to the drawing board. The Tanya Shich V'Zera Shazov Mitama B'Masa Kol Me Eisleis. So we found the Tana who held Shich V'Zera of Azov is Mitama B'Masa for 24 hours. Rabbi Yosy Omer Yoimai, only until the end of that day. What is the machlokes as to how long the Shich V'Zera is Mitama for? Dr. Gemara, be the Shmuel Rami. Shmuel had a stira. It says in one pasuk, in one ish, Asher lo yetar mikra loyla, and loyla means up until the night, but it stops at the night. Uchsiv, there's another pasuk that says lifnois erev. Let's see the pasuk inside, if I can find it. Lifnois erev. V'haya lifnois erev yirchatz b'mayim u'chavoya shemesh yobay al toicha ma'achara. So this, when it says lifnois erev, Tosfos tells us that it means until the next evening, meaning 24 hours. Lifnois erev yirchatz b'mayim. Man damer meisleis dayik mi lifnois erev. The man damer holds that the zera is matam b'masa 24 hours, is focusing more on the pasuk of lifnois erev. The Edich and the man that will hold it only told me until the end of that day. Daik mikre loila. Perfect Gemara. Man damer melifnas erev haksiv mikre loila. What did he do with the pasuk of mikre loila? Amalei ucha the carry lemasa belayla. It's called mikre loila because carry normally happens at night, so that's why it's called that. But not to read into it that the tumah only goes until the night. What is the Tana who learned that it only goes to the night? What did he learn from lifnas erev? So Tosfos offers a pshat that many ask on, but let's see what Tosfos says. Tosfos says, the nira loymar, the idich doirish lifnei erev, kididashina b'safri, the carry poiter ziva shalacharea kol me'esleis. That if someone sees carry, then for the next week, it patters the ziva. Problem with it is we're not sure if this is a maskana or not. We're learning that this Tana over here is learning different pshat on our Mishnah. He's learning that the kezer itself is mitame, not out to the ziva. Well, that's what Tosfos says. Okay, zok the heilige Mishnah weiter. Nazir haya Shmuel kediver Rabbi Nahiroi. According to Rabbi Nahiroi, Shmuel Hanavi was a Nazir. The Rambam asks, what difference does it make if Shmuel was a Nazir or not? Zok the Rambam, there's two nafkaminas. One nafkamina is, that's another thing I didn't understand the Rambam. I'm Pirush Mishnah, so I asked for a palm. I was in the house yesterday to ask him to tell me pshat of the Rambam. They just to touch it for me. So the first pshat of the Rambam is very easy to understand. He says, if someone says, hey, Shmuel, I want to be like Shmuel, is that an expression of a Kabbalas Naziris or not? If Shmuel is a Nazir, maybe it's an expression of a Kabbalas Naziris. But he also says, because we have to know Navi. We have to know pshat and pasuk. We have to know what Shmuel was. That's the second pshat in the Pirush Mishnah, like Rambam. Shneimar umoira loyala al roishay. When Chana was when Chana was asking Hashem to give her a child, what Chana said was, "Imroi sira ba'ani amasecha uzachartani v'leishishkach amasecha unasata la'mascha zera noshim unasata v'lashem kol yomei chayav umoira loyala al roishay." So Moira Loyal Roshai means he will not have a razor on his head. Where do you find such a similar language? By a no Nazir, by Shimshon. It also says Nemar b'Shimshon u'Moira. So there it was a Malach talking. It said he nehara v'yalat ben u'Moira Loyal Roshai kinazir lekim yanar minabat. So by Shimshon it says before she was a Nazir, but Chana only accepted upon herself to make her son into a Nazir. And remember, when we learned the sugya, we learned that there's a halacha l'Moshe Messina that a father could be mad to his son ben Naziris. If Shmuel is a Nazir, how could his mother be mad to him ben Naziris? She has no power to be mad to him ben Naziris. So the Achronim talk about it a lot, and the Rishonim don't talk about it, which is also one of the Pella. The Rishonim don't talk about this problem. I believe the Radak in Shmuel, the Radak says that nobody asks kasha, but we need to know where does she get a right to be mad to her son ben Naziris. So it could be her Kabbalah was to convince him to be a Nazir when he gets older, or could be she convinced her husband to make him into a Nazir, because you don't find anywhere that a woman can be mad to her son ben Nazir. But there's no halachic source for that. Okay? So Zok to Gemara. So just let's say Mam Moira Amur b'Shimshon Nazir Af Moira Amur b'Shmuel Nazir. Amr Yosy B'Haloi Ein Moira El Shal Basa B'Dam. Moira Lav Davka means Moira as in scissors. Maybe Moira means Miloshin Maris Srarus. Moira Loyal Roshai. No one will be a boss over my Shmuel, because he's going to be the leader. He's going to be the God Ladar. He's going to be the shofet of the generation. Maybe that's what it means, and it doesn't mean Naziris. Although the Marsha at the end says, maybe Rabbi Yosy is not arguing on Rabbi Nahiroi that Shmuel was a Nazir. Maybe he's just saying that's not how you touch Moira. Moira doesn't mean a scissor. Moira means he'll never have someone who's going to tell him what to do, because people are always going to listen to him. Why? Because since he'll be a Nazir and he'll be Kadosh, that'll catapult him to Gedula. So there's such a shaila as to what this means. But the Pashup Shot is he's saying it doesn't mean he was a Nazir. It means he was going to be the Mar, the Sar. No Moira will be over him. Amar Rabbi Nerai told him that cannot be pshat, because we do know that Shmuel was afraid of others. There was people with power over him. But like for Nemar, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Shmuel HaNavi to anoint, to be Moshe David HaMelech as the next king, Shmuel said, Shmuel, how could I go? Vishama Shaul Bargeni. Shaul hears that under his nose, I was Moshe, a new king. He's going to kill me. So you see clearly, you clearly saw that Shmuel had Moira of Basa V'Dam on him. One of the halachas we learn from here is Shluchei Mitzvah are nizoikin if it's Heicha the Shchiach Hezek. Normally we say Shliach Mitzvah Eid Nizoikin. So why was Shmuel worried? Shmuel was worried because it's Shchiach Hezeka. When you go anoint a king under the nose of the existing king, you can call that Shchiach Hezeka, and therefore you don't have the protection of a Shliach Mitzvah. You see, he did have fear. You see, he had fear of others. Exactly. Okay, so that's our machlokes. Amar Rav l'Chia Barei. Rav told Chia his son, and apparently this member that we're quoting from Chia doesn't have anything to do with our Mishnah, other than the fact that we like ending a Masechta with a nice piece of Agadata. It says, Chatoifu Baruch, whenever you have an opportunity to be the one who benches b'mezuman, to say Rabbi Yisrael Bel and Benchen, or Rabbi Yisrael Nevarech, what you should do is Chatoifu Baruch. Lozach nishbeten. If you have an opportunity, chaperein that opportunity. Chatoifu Baruch. Chatoif koishal bracha ubarach bircha zimun. Chaperein if you have such an opportunity. Lememra, are you telling me the mevarach adif? Are you telling me it's better to be the one who makes the bracha rather than the one who responds amen to the bracha? But Tanya, we learned Rabbi Yosy Omer, Godel ha'ina amen, Yosy min ha'mevarach. It's even greater to answer amen than it is to say the bracha in the first place. Well, Amalei Rab Nahiroi, also, it's also relevant because we're bringing in another discussion between Rabbi Yosy and Rab Nahiroi. Hashemayim kachu. I could swear that that is the way it is. Teda, sharei guliyarim miskarim b'machama. What Rab Nahiroi is saying? That the oina. Why? Because when a country is going to fight a war with the enemy, what they'll do is they'll first send in their low-level soldiers to start a fight and to shepherd. What's going to happen? What's going to happen is that's going to bring out, to counterattack or to defend, it's going to bring out the best of the elite of the enemy. Once they're in disarray because they were fighting through the weaker introductory soldiers, or what we'll call the pawns, then the big guys come out from behind and decimate the enemy. So the analogy is that the person who says the Rabbi Shimshon mentioned, he's the pawn that was sent forward to shake things up, and then when the people answer amen, that's the Nitzachon. That's the Nitzachon. So you see that answering amen is better. And the Gemara Tanoi, it's actually a machloikas Tanoim. The Tanya we learned, Echad HaMevarach ve'echad ha'aynu amen b'mashma ela shemimarin l'mevarach tchila. We first send a Yeshua to the Mevarach, or as Tosha says, Litein Schar. So there's two different ways to look at it. We see a Tana who holds that Mevarach is better, and we had the other Brisa who said Gadol ha'ayna amen Yosy min ha'mevarach. So you see, there's Tanoim who hold each way. And then the Gemara ends off with a ending that are used in 4 Masechtas. The ending, this following ending is used in Brachos, it's used in Krisos, it's used in Nazir, and it's used, I think, in Yavamas, which is the Rishtevis of Banayach. Banayach, these 4 Gemaras, you end off with this line. Amar Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Chanina, Talmidei Chachamim Mar B'Shalom Bayim Shenemar L'Chol Banayach L'Mudei Hashem. So the question is, what's the significance of these 4 Masechtas? So the same Amar Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Chanina, this shtickle, this exact shtickle. Yeah. So the reason is because all of these Masechtas are talking about Shalom. So let's go through it. There's Yavamis, is Shalom ben Adam Lachaverai, right? You're taking care of your brother's family. So that's the Shalom ben Adam Lachaverai. Then there's Krisos is ben Gufl Neshama. Then there's Nazir, which is ben Ish Ishtai, because we know it helps fidelity in marriage. So what am I missing? There's Krisos and Brachos is Shalom ben HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael. You make a bracha to show that you appreciate what the Rebbeinu Shalom says. So the question here is, the Maharsha asks, the reason why these Masechtas generally end with this memory is because you always want to end a Masechta with a little bit of anagadita. But our Gemara doesn't need that, because our Gemara just had the shtickle of the brachas. So what is it doing over here? Zok Maharsha a hafel de kazach. What led into this, the Mishnah? So what's the shaykhs from this to the Mishnah? Zokt, the Maharsha Gavalti. Shmuel and Shimshon were both people of Moira. They're both leaders. How does one become a leader? How does one become a God Lador? That's if they're raised from their childhood, B'Kedusha, B'Naziris. So, Ein Chanami Moira, and the Maharsha wants to say, could be Rabbi Yosy, he was never arguing on Rabbi Nairoi. Ein Chanami, Shmuel was a Nazir. But the word Moira, Loyal Roisha, is not fatayched as a razor, it's fatayched as sroros. There won't be sroros over him. In other words, he will be the shofet. Like Shmuel Hanavi was the shofet, like Shimshon was the shofet. What does a shofet do? A shofet brings shalom, because a shofet is shofet between people who need something arbitrated. So a shofet brings shalom. How do you bring shalom? By becoming a shofet? That's only if already Meirechem, there's a Kedusha. You see Shmuel Hanavi as well as Shimshon were already Kaddish Meirechem. The Kedusha was infused in them from when they were little children. That leads someone to be a Golem, to be a leader, to be a Moira, and that leads to Shalom. So that's why the last part is brought. How do your children grow up to be Gedolei Olam? That's if they're Limudei Hashem. That's if you train them from when they're young to sit and learn Torah. Then you'll have Varav Shalom. Then your children will be a great trigger of Shalom and Klal Yisrael. Why? Because they will be Oil L'Gdula, and when someone's Oil L'Gdula and he's a Shofet, he's a Posek, he's a Rav, that brings to Shalom and Klal Yisrael. So Zakta Maharsha, the whole flow of the Gemara fits in perfectly. We're talking about Shmuel and Shimshon being Nazirim, and he also connects it to the Chatoif U'Baruch. Why it's better to say Amen, because Amen is the big ones. So there's a beautiful Maharsha over here. Let me just look up the Maharsha again, because I forgot how he connects in the shtickle with the brachas. So he says over here, all the way here at the end, the very last thing that he says. The Koi Nami Amasnisin, the Messiah Ba Masecha Zeh, the Indian Naziris, Shmuel B'Shimshon, Shemi Betan Iman, Huzmanu Lavodas Hashem. K'moitzakasav B'Shmuel, on the Satev Lashem, Kol Yemei Chayav, U'B'Shimshon Ksiv, Nazir Elakim Yeh, U'Lazeh Ba Zeh Maimer Lakan, Talmidei Chacham Emar B'Shalom, Ki'ilu Shezacher B'Masnisin, Shal Yushoifte Yisrael, Laso Shalom B'Neihem. K'moitzakasav B'Shmuel, V'shom Shafar As Yisrael, U'B'Shimshon Ksiv, V'Yishboit As Yisrael, Ma'atzikra D'Chsiv B'Chol B'Nayich, V'Oit Shal Yubonim Ketanim, Hayu Lemudei Hashem. Ki Lekach Huchanu Mim'ei Imam, Val Yodam v'rav shalom. The mishpat tzedek she'asu b'Yisrael. V'chein shalom al Yisrael. So he doesn't connect this to the brachas. So yeah, right. So that's how you prepare. So what Rav Palm showed me was a Ramban at the beginning of the parsha of Naziris in Yosy that says that the Nazir takes on the kedusha of a kohen gadol. The Nazir takes on the kedusha of a kohen gadol because of the precious that he accepts upon himself. At the Ramban suggests that the reason why a Nazir brings a chatos, he also says it there at the beginning of the parsha of Naziris in Yosy, the reason why the Nazir brings a chatos when he finishes his Naziris is because he's stopping. You're at such a high level, why would you stop? Okay, so let's see the Heilige Mishnah. At least we'll get a start of the Mishnah of Sotah. Zokt, Baruch Hashem, we were Zoycha to finish Nazir. And Bez Hashem, we should be able to be Zoycha to finish.
Aren't you saving it? Aren't you saving it? Did you actually finish it?
Yeah, I left the last 3 words.
Oh.
I left the last 3 words. So we can't do a how do you know? We don't have a minyan. Okay, let's see the Gemara. I think I'm making the scene right after Shachris on Shol's Mazonis. Okay, Zok the Heilig Gemara. Hamakana leishtoi. If someone
you're not a Bechor then.
No, I'm not
obviously.
Okay. I always tell my oldest sibling, by the time my parents got to me, they had perfected the model already. You were just the prototypes. Zok the Heilig Gemara. Hamakana leishtoi. Very good. Chaim is saying that's why a Bechor gets Pishnayim, because he was the guinea pig upon whom the parents practiced. Okay, Zok the Gemara, Hamakana leishtoi, if someone is Mekana, his wife. And Rashi tells us that the word Hinoi is coming from the way the Torah describes it. It says V'kinala. And what it means is he tells his wife, Al Tisteri Imploini. Don't seclude yourself with the milkman. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Mekanala al Pishnayim, when he's Mekana her, there has to be 2 Eidim that hear him say, Al Tisteri and Pliny. And if he finds that she violated his kinui and she did seclude herself with Pliny, he doesn't need to have 2 Eidim watching. He alone could come to Bezdin and say, I want to go through the process of Sotah with my wife because she violated my kinui. But Rabbi Shua Omer, Mekanela al Pishnayim umashka al Pishnayim. He also needs 2 Eidim that witnessed that she secluded with this man who he was Mekana her from. Ketad Mekanela, what exactly is the process of kinui? So Zok Bach, Omar lo bifnei shnayim. He told her in front of 2 people, Al tedabri imish ploini. Don't speak to this person. V'dibra imai. And what if she spoke to him? She violated what he said. That's not called being over on his kinui. Adain hi muteres levesa umuteres lechal b'truma. And if she's a kohen, she can eat truma. However, nichnas ha'imai levesa seiser. But if she actually secluded with him, v'shasa imai kidei tuma, and she was there long enough that there could have been an avera, then asur levesa, she's also to her husband. V'asur lechal b'truma. If her husband is a kohen, she's no longer allowed to eat truma. The emeis, and if the husband dies and there were no children, she cannot marry his brother, and therefore we say chayletzes v'loy mishabemes. Her brother-in-law will do chalitza for her, but will not do a yibum for her. Zok tehele gemara, michti. Let's figure this out. Tana mi Nazir solet. What was the last Masechta we just learned? How could we forget it? Nazir. My Tana dikatana Sotah. Why is Sotah the logical next step after Nazir? Dr. Mark the Rebbe, because of what Rebbe taught us. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa. Rebbe Omer Lama Nisbacha Parshas Nazir the Parshas Sotah. Why in the Torah is the Parshas Nazir right after the Parsha of Sotah in Parshas Nazir? Lo Malach to teach us. Shekol Roya Sotah B'Kol Kula. If someone sees a Sotah B'Kol Kula, Yazer Atzim in a Yain. If someone sees a Sotah B'Kol Kula and sees the consequences of lewd behavior, he doesn't need the zerizos of being Naziris. he'll for sure be careful. If anything, a guy who didn't see a Sotah B'Kula, he's the one who should be Yazer Asman Hayayin. So Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, it was Masbi, this was a beautiful story. And I don't remember who the story happened with, but in a yeshiva once, there was a Suda, the Bacham were sitting and eating a Suda, and the Rosh Yeshiva was asking around Shilas, he was throwing out Shilas for herring the boys. And one boy didn't have the answer that the Rosh Yeshiva asked. So he was so mevuzah from not having the answer, he got up in the middle of the Suda, he ran to Bismedish, and he became a major masmid, and it ended up making him into a massive Talmid Chacham. Zok Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, when you have a Hasoris, you need to crystallize it, you need to make it, you need to cement it, you need to make it permanent. You have to do something with a hargosha that you have, and you have to act on it. So yes, Kol Haroy Sotah B'Kula, as much as he's in the Siragish that he has to be Erlich, just it's like saying, okay, from now on I'm not going to break my diet. That doesn't work. You have to do something concrete to crystallize this Irish that you have. So therefore, Dafka is someone who had the Ergish of Tshuva, because he was Roy Sotah B'Kula, the way he should make it concrete and solidify it is by being Makabal Naziris. That harnesses the power of that Hisrakshus, of that motivation, and puts it into something that he'll see results from. So the Shaila was this fellow who ran out, and he didn't bench, and he ran and became a Talmid Chacham. So a big Gadol said, halachically, was it right what he did? Of course not. You're not allowed to walk away in the middle of a Suda without benching. But had he not done that, he would have never been the Talmid Chacham that he became. Because at that moment, he had such a hisrakshus that he got to buckle down and learn properly. He had to act on it immediately. Because had he waited and benched, it would have died out and it would have been business as usual. Correct the Gemara. So if you're following Rebbe, let's look at the Torah. The Torah has Sotah first and then has Nazir. Why does our Sugya have Nazir first and then Sotah? Listen to Sotah, other listen to Nazir. I did the Tanakh Subas. Let's not forget, we're in Seder Nashim here. So we started with Ksubas. And in Ksubas, it says, V'tana Amadir, there's a parak in Ksubas that discusses Nedarim. Therefore, the logical next step was to learn about Nedarim, Tana Nedarim. But I did the Tana Nedarim, Tana Nazir, because Nazir is also like Nedarim. The Damin Nedarim is all based on Nedarim. And after Nedarim, the Katani Sotah, we go back to our regularly programmed schedule. Okay, Gavaldik, let's stop here. Mez Hashem will be Mamshach tomorrow. Mazel Tov, everybody. We finished Nazir. Morgen is Erev Shabbos. So that is the Shaila. What should we do for tomorrow? Should I try to get ahead, which won't be